was a very sort of, should we say, a roundabout route by which I got into the entertainment business. And really what it boils down to is my teacher in my last year of primary school, Miss Smith, started to teach the class French. I think she figured some of us were going to go off to grammar school, so we better start learning some of it. And, I knew about this place abroad because some of my family had served in the forces in the First and the Second World War. I knew they spoke other languages. I had no knowledge of what they were at all. And so she started with basic French for little boys and girls. And somehow or other, she sort of lit something for me. A little flame was set going. And I realised this was something I could do. And then I went on to grammar school and I did French, and that worked out quite well. And they said, you should go on and do German. And I didn't want to do that because I wanted to be a doctor. So I couldn't do both those things. So I had to study physics and chemistry to do what I wanted to do, and didn't study German and history and geography, which is what in the end I finished up absolutely passionate about. Failed all the O-levels in the sciences, and then left school with about 5 O-levels. And in the end, I was working for a paper company who had a business in Germany. So I finally finished up at the German Cultural Institute, as it was then. They now call it the Goethe Institute, doing an intensive course in German language over the course of 3 months, evening classes. And that went very well. And so I was now looking for a life and a career and a job and something that would hopefully take me away from Britain. And, with 4 O-levels, there wasn't a lot of choice. And I saw a job in the paper looking for people to sell encyclopedias to American servicemen who were in the occupational forces in Germany. And I got the job, went to Germany, and I met a woman there, not long after I'd been there, and she said to me, you should be an actor. And she took me along to the theatre group that were on the airbase where she worked in Wiesbaden, not too far from Frankfurt. And she introduced me to the world of theatre. And that became a hobby. I started to act. And wherever I went, I would get involved with a theatre group. My whole career has all been based on Miss Smith teaching me French. My whole life, everything. The reason I'm here talking to you today is because of Miss Smith deciding to make me understand that, a boat was un bateau, and a ball was une balle, and an orange was un orange. So French I learned in a very structured way with a very solid base of grammar and vocabulary. And, we were taught in an old-fashioned way in that for like 5 years you had to learn 10 words every night. And when you came in the next day, you had to know them. And you were tested. It was like, stand up and say the 10 words you had to learn last night. So you did it by rote. Then the German, when I went to the German Cultural Institute, I was 19 or 20. I must have been 19, I think. I'll never forget the very first evening. There were 20 strangers, or however many of us there were, sitting in this room. And in walked this guy in a very, very smart little suit, little gold-rimmed spectacles, and he just said, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Professor, whatever his name was, and these are the last words you will ever hear me speak in English. Also, jetzt sprechen wir Deutsch. And that was it. He started to speak in German, and he never, ever, ever, over the 3 months that I was there, ever spoke English again. And you just had to start working on what he was presenting you with, obviously in a very slow, methodical way. But at the end of it, I came away from that with a very, very workable knowledge of German, which has stood me in great stead all over the world for years. It's funny, the whole class thing and speaking languages. I'm a working class bloke who lives a middle class life, but very definitely from working class origins in London. And I've been yakking away in French because French is the language I'm comfortable in, because I've used it the most and more regularly than all the others. And you know, I'm comfortable in any situation in French. And I found myself speaking in French, and somebody within the group sort of looked at me and said, "Oh, Larry, where on earth did you learn to speak French like that?" And so there's this sort of funny little inbuilt assumption that, you know, it's not going to be working class people that do speak languages. And there's no doubt Britain is very definitely class segregated. No doubt about it, for me anyway. You know, there is a definite, you know, if you want to be well accepted in British society, the better you speak, the easier it will be. And I've learned this the long, hard way. So, you know, I know, you know, if I'm like with a load of geezers, I can have the crack like this. But, you know, if I'm amongst a bunch of middle class people, they know I'm not from them, but they know that I can actually hold a conversation and use the language with an element of clarity, and it works better. So for working class people, if you can learn a foreign language and you can speak it well, that puts you on the same level as anybody else that speaks that language from your country. Doesn't matter what they're from. If you can speak French or German or Italian or Mandarin or Czechoslovakian or whatever, if you can speak one of those languages well and you are like me, you know, ordinary bloke, that's it. You're going to be judged the same way as somebody who's come from Oxbridge, who's come from Eton. It's not going to make any difference if what they want is somebody who can speak the lingo. By the time a 10-year-old now gets to be of working age, most of the good jobs are going to require a good working knowledge of English. And so people from China, people from India, people from Brazil, people from Spain are all going to be after those jobs. If the only language you speak is English, you are going to be at a distinct disadvantage, because your language, albeit the language of the world, if you've got the backup of another language, it gives you another dimension, because what it means is that you can go to one of these other countries and you could work there. Whereas as it is, you're going to be stuck with working where you are. Of course, all the talk about speaking languages and encouraging people to speak languages is dependent on what goes on within the upper realms of government and who runs educational policy. And the only way that that can be affected is by organisations like The Guardian and the British Academy actively generating interest in what is seen to be by a lot of people a problem, and making that known to the government so that things can actually be put in motion to get something done about it. Because I can bang on about it all day, but in actual fact, what it needs is somebody in education, as it were, right at the top of the scale, in government, that actually designates money, that changes policy, that directs energy and primarily finance towards things happening. And so the best I can do is work with the people that have access to those levels of government. And so the British Academy and The Guardian, between them, doing something like a promotional project to encourage young people to speak languages, to encourage anybody to learn to speak languages. As far as I'm concerned, that's what I need. I can help, but that's all I can do. They can actually make things happen. It really does need to be changed as far as I'm concerned, because when it comes to a point that in this country, aged 14, you can, in theory, stop learning a foreign language, but you can't stop learning religious knowledge.